You're listening to the Connections Through Creativity podcast. Here, we dive in deep into personal growth, creativity, inclusion, education, mental health, entrepreneurship, connection, community, and how we can make a positive impact. I'm your host, Rebecca Jane, founder of Rebecca Jane Art, an inclusive community art instructor, mother, author, and artist with a love of living a creative life through joy, growth, and making a positive impact in the world. Art is the catalyst for creating connections. Everyone is an artist, and everyone deserves a safe space to be and feel creative, included, and heard. When we create connections through creativity, we are opening an inclusive environment to improve mental health, education, and creativity in our community. By first starting with us, we can show up for ourselves, our family, and clients so we can live a fulfilling creative life that inspires others. Become a certified inclusive community art instructor to make a radical impact in your community. Join the 10-week certification course and mastermind by visiting RebeccaJaneArt.ca. Are you ready? Let's get creative. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Connections Through Creativity. Before we get started on this amazing episode today, I wanted to just fill you in really quickly. So I've been doing a lot of behind the scenes work this month, and I've been making some big and difficult changes in my business so that I can focus on what will make the biggest impact. So I want to fill you all in. So what I'm going to do is do a little bonus episode with the announcement, and so be sure to check that out, okay? All right, so let's get started. Janée J. Baugher is an author, speaker, instructor, and poet. She is the author of guidebook, The Ekphrastic Writer, Creating Art Influenced Poetry, Fiction, and Nonfiction, as well as the poetry collections, The Body Physics, and The Coördinates of Yes. To date, her books are collected in nearly 100 libraries worldwide. Since earning an MFA from the Eastern Washington University, her writing has been published in over 120 journals such as Saturday Evening Post, Tin House, the Southern Review, the American Journal of Poetry, the Writer's Chronicle, and Nimrod. Her writing has been adapted for the stage and set to music at venues such as University of Cincinnati, Interlochen Center for the Arts, Dance Now, Ensemble in Florida, University of North Carolina-Pembroke, and the Otterbein University, and she's been featured in the Reader at the Library of Congress. A two-time Pushcart Prize and the Best of the Net nominee, she has been a writer in the resident of Soaring Gardens, Island Institute of Sitka, Silver Creek Residency, Marble House Project, Dorland Mountain Arts Colony, the North Cascades Institute, and Right on Door County. Currently, she teaches creative writing in Seattle, is an assistant editor at the Boulevard magazine, the columnist at the Ekphrastic Review, and the 2021 Poet in Residence at Maryhill Museum of Art. So I recently connected with Janée, and we decided that we are kindred spirits because we had so much in common, and we had a lot of fun connecting. This episode is so rich with information that neither of us planned on. I had no idea what Ekphrastic Writer was, or even how to say it, as you will see in a moment, when we first connected. But this is just beautiful, and I think she has inspired me to keep writing my own poems that I used to write in high school, which I don't think I'm ready to pull out, but that's okay. I think I'm ready to start writing though, which is the more important part of this. So I hope that it inspires you as well, and I hope you enjoy. So let's get started. Welcome. We are here today with Janée, and we are going to be talking about art and how we can make it inclusive and accessible. So, but first, we're going to get started on our intro questions. So, hello, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, so first, every time I have a guest join me, I always ask these 4 intro questions to get to know you a little bit better. So the first one is, what's your favorite quote?
I have 2. So one is, poetry is not a code to be broken, but a way of seeing with the eyes shut. And that's by Linda Paston.
Ooh, I love that. And that really goes over exactly what we're talking about today. So that's
Nice.
Yeah.
And the second one is by the psychoanalyst Carl Jung. And the quote I love by him is, "The creation of something new isn't accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity."
Beautiful. Okay, and the second one is, what is your favorite book?
My favorite novel is The Secret History by Donna Tartt.
Oh, you have it there.
Yeah, it came out in 1992, and the narrative and the characterization, I just love, love, love. I've read the novel maybe 7 times.
Oh, wow, 7 times. Wow. That's awesome. And what inspires you, or like what art inspires you, or that you love to create on your own?
So I write books. My first 2 books are collections of poems. So I love poetry, but I find inspiration is everywhere. So I love nature, I love the visual arts, I love dance, I love architecture, you name it. I'm just open to beauty and the creative possibilities and virtually everything that I see and experience.
Oh, wow. That you just spoke to my heart right there. I love that. I totally,
Lovely.
yeah, I'm all about inspiration is absolutely everywhere. And that's what I teach in my classes. So that's great. Okay. And then what is something that you're into right now?
Well, right now, meaning my whole life, is horseback riding. So I was very, very fortunate in that I got to start taking lessons when I was a little girl, 8 years old, in a suburb outside of Seattle. And so it's still my favorite thing to do, is be on horseback and be out in nature and just, disappear among the trees.
Beautiful. Oh, that's so nice. I very rarely get the chance to go horseback riding, but there's a few that live on my street, and I always get to peek at them.
You have horsey neighbors?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I live outside of town, and we have like a whole farm on one end, and then just one horse and right on my street. I'm sure there's others, but there's 2 that I can see from the road. So yeah, on my daily drive.
Lucky you.
It's nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
All right. So tell me about your book. And then I think that will be a good opening to what we're talking about, because that's kind of it's hard to even say the word. So you tell me.
Yes. So I had a book. It was my 3rd book. It came out in June of 2020, and the title is The Ekphrastic Writer: Creating Art-Influenced Poetry, Fiction, and Nonfiction. And so what it is, it's a guidebook that I designed with not necessarily writers, but with people in mind who I knew were going to look at art and who wanted a way to verbally engage with with the visual arts. And so, verbal is both, written and out of the mouth. And so whichever way you choose to engage with the visual arts, this is a great guide to show you sort of the art of deep looking at a piece of art. And then also it instructs you, what is a watercolor? How is a certain type of print made? What's the difference between an oil and acrylic paint? How do sculptors make their art on this 3D scale? What's the museum experience, etc. And so it just gives you everything in terms of descriptive writing. That's what the term ekphrasis means. It comes from the Greek meaning to describe. So really, anytime that you use language descriptively, you are speaking ekphrastically. But the term ekphrasis was adopted about 25 years ago to mean the subgenre of creative writing, specifically to indicate creative writing influenced by the visual arts. So, for example, the first time I did this, I went to the Guggenheim Museum in New York City, and I saw this painting by this German painter, and I was just awestruck and taken back. And so I opened up my notebook and wrote a poem to this. And so that was my first ekphrastic poem to this art piece. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is, it's very, very interesting because you're making it accessible and engaging. And I like it because it's not just, I talk about accessibility isn't, it's not one-sided. It's not just for the people who are that need it, but it benefits everybody. Accessibility benefits everybody. So in what you're saying is you're not just giving it life for people who are, who can't see, but you're also giving it more depth and more meaning for us as visual learners or visual people who can see. So we're getting this audio with the verbal, you're getting it audible, and then you're also getting it um, more in depth with the text. So I really, really like what you're saying here. It's very cool. I've never heard of
Well,
this, and I really like it.
I love what you said, and I've never thought of ekphrastic writing on this level. But in terms of accessibility, so you have writers who, like myself, who go to museums and galleries and, they find a piece that they're absolutely stunned by. And it's in that space of like, whoa, what am I seeing? I cannot make sense of this, because it's not intellectual.
Yep.
It comes from the instinct, just like Jung said. And so then what happens is after you write that piece and the piece gets published, then not only are you, introducing your readership to your type of art making, but you're also introducing readers to art and artists who they might not have ever heard of or known, which is sort of like peeling back the layers. And I hadn't thought about that until your comment, and I really appreciate that. And that ekphrastic writers are necessarily, encouraging their listeners to pursue the art. Because I mean, I would say, yes, listen to my poem, but also look at this piece that I wrote to. Not necessarily because one needs the other. I mean, certainly the painting doesn't need my poem. And I'd like to say that the poem stands on its own, for example. But it's just more of like a curiosity, because the avenue or the pathway that the painting took me in order for me to write my poem is vastly different than anyone else's pathway, right? And so it's always open to interpretation. But I really appreciate you saying that, because it's gotten me to think of accessibility on a new level.
For sure. Well, like you were telling me about that museum. Can you tell us about the museum with that you went in and you could make it Braille. They had Braille, I think. You tell me.
Yeah, so in writing the Ekphrastic Writer, I did a lot of research. So my bibliography list is like 250 books and articles. And so
Wow.
I love my research. I started out as a scientist, and so I have a research background. It's really important to me. And I also just think it's kind of the height of hubris to think that you as one individual, have this great person, right? I mean, it's a course of people that were really required in order for me to write this book, and for that I'm grateful. And so in my journey of research, I discovered that there are a couple of museums that have made advances in accessibility, specifically for the visually impaired. One I can think of is the Museum, and what
Oh,
they
sorry.
did was
You froze for a second there. I didn't hear that last part there.
Okay. So the Prado Museum in Madrid invited artists to come in and do 3D renderings of some of the most famous paintings. And so then as the visually impaired can come in and have a tactile experience, actually feeling the fabric, right? So here we are as sighted people, and we're seeing a painting, let's say, of a court gesture, and we have, the king and the queen, and we have, someone delivering tea on a tray. And so we're visualizing the textures. But for the visually impaired, they actually can feel the metal of the serving tray, and they can feel the satin of the queen's dress. And so actually, as I'm thinking about it right here in this moment, I'm realizing that they're getting, sort of in some sense, like a better sense of the painting because they get to touch the fabric. I mean, we can only look at the fabric and imagine what it would be like to touch the satin. And of course, we're seeing that the satin is a type of green and her collar is a type of purple, right? We're seeing these things, but they get to touch. And so it really excited me to know that, this is presumably the last community that has been prevented from, really being welcomed into in spaces that are inherently for those of us who have vision. And so definitely more of that is being done, which is just, it's such a gift.
And then again, it like benefits us too, because it's like we can get this other experience from it as well. And then I'm also thinking of color blindness. This would help with color blindness as well. And like you would get, I would love to hear their interpretation, their poems about the same art pieces with a different color palette in their mind, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's my goal for my life, is to take tours through museums in order to verbally respond, and there's no right or wrong answer, which I love. It's just the spirit of being in that space and seeing what the art gives to you, and from that you share your uniqueness. But as I'm speaking about visiting museums, I'm recognizing that that's problematic in terms of accessibility as well. And so, one thing that the pandemic taught us is the importance of having accessibility to the internet and to computers. And if you have those tools, then you get to visit virtually these museums and galleries. And like, for example, if you've never been to St. Petersburg, you can visit the Hermitage in St. Petersburg online. You can take a tour and spend hours and hours and hours. And isn't that beautiful for people who will never get to St. Petersburg? And so I really celebrate that. And yes, it's true. There's no substitute for that in-person experience, but that's okay. Before we had accessibility to, before everything was most things were digitized, there was no hope for those individuals who lived in, underprivileged communities and couldn't make that pilgrimage. And then I like to remind people, at least, well, I've been to museums in countries, in like 30 countries and all over the United States. And I want to remind people that 99% of the places that I know of, the admission fee is really a suggested donation, and that you should feel free to donate just $1 instead of $25 or 50 cents or nothing. And that's okay. That they really make it. It's frustrating because typically you'll see, in 75-point font, $25 admission fee, and then in 2.5 suggested donation. But I really want people to know that if you have no money and you have a ton of kids and you think it would be lovely to take them there, you take them there, and they will go to that place.
Yeah, I like that you said that. I think our main museum here in Fredericton, they have it's Thursdays, I believe. I might be wrong, but I think it's Thursdays. They have that's when it's a suggested donation. I think the other days it's still like a $10 or $20 fee or whatever, but Thursday is the day where you can go, and that's when it's like you can pay what you have there. So they're much more verbal about that, but maybe it's every day and they didn't tell us. But that's good to know. Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk about our early art engagement. So that's my art journey is very much about all ages. There's no age restriction on art, but specifically I have one class of mine that is art and learning, where I connect literacy to art, and that's for preschoolers. Well, they're ages 2 to 6. So I'm starting that early, and I really am fascinated by that we can connect literacy to art across all ages. So I want to talk about art and early art engagement.
So can you say a little bit more about what you do with literacy and art? Like, give me a sense of what happens in the classroom at that age.
Yeah. Okay. So they're 2 to 6 years old. They come in, we read a book. So for example, this Sunday was the class, and we read a book it was a Dr. Seuss book, and it was called "Oh Say, Can You Say Dinosaur?" And so we went through the book, and we learned about dinosaurs. So because there was a bunch of facts in the book. So we talked about dinosaurs, and then there was that engagement. They talked about dinosaurs, and we were, and then they saw the pictures in the book, and and then we created a dinosaur with our watercolors and our Sharpies and stuff. So we were connecting the book to making art. So we're learning something from literacy and then connecting it through art.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you for painting that picture. That is so precious. So I taught children's literature at University of Phoenix for a couple of years ago. And that helped to inform this chapter in my book called Early Art Engagement. So it's really curious. I learned so much from teaching the children's literature course, and that I had never realized how much went into this idea of image and text relationship. And so there's my favorite children's book, picture book, is I think it's called Shirley, Where Did You Go? I can get back to you on that. But what's really interesting is what the author did. The author was the author illustrator. What he did was he had an image that went with the text on one side of so you have a recto verso. When you open the book, you have a recto side and a verso side, left side, right side. So on one side, he had an image and text that went along with it. On the other side, he had an image that didn't go along with the text at all. That was totally independent. And so it was like he had parallel narrative. And what you realized was he was illustrating what was happening in reality. So from like the parent's perspective, and that was the text that was supporting that. And then the other side of the page was an illustration of the child, of the girl's imagination. Right. So on one side of the book, you had an image of her at the beach with her parents, and it being kind of like boring. And then the other side, you have her as a pirate in a pirate ship, and her like fighting off a shark or something, right? Then you turn the page, and so it's just this lovely moment of like, okay, you really have these choices, right? As illustrator and author, right? Are you pairing the two, or are you separating them, and what many kinds of experiences are had from that. So I delved into early art experience because I wanted to remind. So basically this book, it can be used for children, but children aren't going to read this. This would be
No.
them. Yeah. So I was thinking more of students in MFA programs, etc. But I wanted the adult readers to understand where they came from, which is a world of images and a world of possibilities. Because I know that my adult students have a real tough time in play. And that's why I love that Carl Jung quote, is because my adult learners need to remember that they can't create a poem from their intellect. They have to create a poem, for example, with the notion of playing with language and seeing where that play might take them. Kids know this. And if we're lucky as kids, we can hold on to that magic. But I think that that's holding on to that magic is almost directly contingent on the adults in their lives. So how wonderful that these kids have you as one of their adults in their life who are making these connections and making these memories and having these experiences. And my hope is that every one of your students runs home and shares it with an adult who's also excited about that type of learning, because that's where it builds.
Yeah, actually, I'm very much on, especially in that class because they're young, so the parents have to stay. So I'm very much like, here's a piece of paper for you to join too. And then 90% of the time, unless there's like, they need support, there's 90% of the time the parent is making art again for the first time in who knows how long. So they're engaging as well. And I think I kind of sneak that in there. Like, I'm not like, hey, we're going to make it. It's not a class for, I'm not out there saying this is a family class to paint, mom and dad together. But I'm like, by the way, if you want to make something. So I kind of sneak that in there on them. And then they feel like it's a bonus. And then, because they get to paint with their kids, and then their kids see their adult painting with them, and it's a very beautiful experience. So they're directly engaged, and that is absolutely my goal, is to continue that creativity, especially in those years, because that's when they start entering the school system, and that's when the school system starts taking it's the school system is great and whatever, but it does discourage creativity. So I'm here hoping that this engaging class-like space, safe place, encourages them to continue and hold on to that creativity and that connection, right? So,
well, bravo to you for encouraging the parents' involvement. I mean, that is absolutely genius, because then, that's building experiences and building memories. And then the kid, can't you imagine the kid like, hey mom, remember we made that dinosaur last week? Can we draw a monkey today? And because the kid's like, oh yeah, we had that experience and we did that once. And that was fun. So let's do it again, and like, I draw a better monkey than my mom.
Yeah.
Fun. That's genius. Bravo to you. It's great.
Yeah, it's definitely really, really fun. there's that class specifically, like they're all my classes, but I keep finding new little bonuses to that class that I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't even list out all the benefits to this class. And if I did, the parents are going to be like, whoa, that's a very overwhelming class. I don't want to go. But
Uh,
do you know what I mean? Because I'll be like, here's a list of all the benefits you're getting. And they'd be like, whoa, how do you fit that in a 45-minute class? But honestly,
yeah. Well,
there's so much.
one of the things that you can do is this in marketing, they say, right, you under promise and you over
Yes,
deliver.
yes.
So you can promise on like, a fourth of those. And then at the end of the class,
Yeah.
say, actually, here are all of the benefits that you got. Right.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. No, I try to limit it because it's too overwhelming for me. Yeah. So I see you have a little snippet about coloring books. Do you want to?
I would love to read that.
Okay.
So yeah. So and again, I mean, kids know this, but this is for adults to remember.
Right.
Coloring books. So this is an excerpt of the Ekphrastic Writer, and I'll just read two little paragraphs here. Coloring books. A pre-drawn shape in which we can freely introduce color. First, our introduction of whatever color is a chaos of lines that appear as if we held a crayon in our fist and went back and forth in the general vicinity of the shape. As we age, the way we handle the crayon changes, and our hitting the target area becomes more precise. Later, we are able to intellectualize the decision of which color for which section of the drawing and are mindful to stay within the lines. Before we are taught what is a wrong color for the sky and grass, for example, we pick and apply colors freely. I once overheard a parent indelicately directing the selection of colors to her 2-year-old. No, purple is not the color for trees. Here, use this crayon. Color inside the lines carefully. It is fascinating to consider the moments in our past that could have tipped us toward or away from creative autonomy. Imagine a world in which there are no purple trees.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I'm all about creative limitations, and that is the exactly where that pivotal moment of where that creative limitation hits. It's like somebody in your life, usually it's a parent or an adult, a trusted adult, because you don't necessarily care what other people say, but usually it's a trusted person. And then they say something like that, no, purple doesn't belong on trees, and then bam, their creativity is snapped. And that's so sad that that was a 2-year old, because that means that they didn't get those, if it stuck with them, which I hope it didn't, but it's likely. And then that's stuck with them, at such an early age. That's heartbreaking. And I'm seeing that more, that it's happening early. Maybe that was the case always, but I'm seeing it more now that it's happening at such an early age, that my young kids coming into my class already have those limitations built on them.
I see.
Yeah, and I had not a similar student. She came into the class. I think she was in grade 3, 4, like later elementary school, and she was doodling at school in her art class, and she drew a little stick figure, and it wasn't necessarily, she wasn't there to make like grand art, like she was just doodling, which is totally appropriate. And the teacher told her that you're better than that. You shouldn't be drawing stick figures. And I stopped her right there, because she wasn't even telling me, she was telling the class like, I wasn't allowed to draw my stick figure, and that stuck with her. So I was like, I can't let this continue. And I'm like, you draw those stick figures. Like, it doesn't matter. You can draw a a stick figure one day and an extremely realistic drawing the next day, or the opposite. It doesn't matter. It's your creative expression, right? You can draw the purple trees, draw the stick
Yeah.
figures. So,
Yeah. And I think your perspective and my perspective are similar in that we are artists. We're not just teaching art,
Hmm.
which is totally different. So
Yeah.
we understand the importance of making these creative decisions, being, taking risks, being kooky,
Hmm.
feeling free on the page. We understand that. We understand that there's a time and place for precision, like when you're baking a cake,
Yeah.
or how much oil to put in your car. We understand that, but we also understand the importance of art making and making messes and making mistakes. I have a little anecdote about, what happened when that child grew up. So my mother is 71. She still lives in a suburb of Seattle. When she was in kindergarten, and I wrote a poem about this in my second book because it just broke my heart, called First Art Show 1954. So in kindergarten, they were given, God, I kind of just want to read the poem because it's so poignant.
You have
Um,
it?
I do, I have it. Is
We'll read. Go get it.
that okay? Is
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
okay?
No, that's good. I want to hear it.
I just love my mom, and I just hate what happened to her. So let me try to find it.
That's okay. I'm while you look, I'll just say too, because you have three books, so I'm just gonna make sure that all the books are linked into my show notes so that we can you guys can find them and hopefully get some because this is really interesting.
Okay, so I'll read this poem that I wrote. It's actually a nonfiction poem. Most of my poetry is fiction. First art show for my mother. Rectangular and tacked to the wall, the slab of construction paper painted black. Teachers gossip. Her parents cock their heads. The 5-year-old gets sent to the psychiatrist. Perhaps it was all a mistake. Maybe she had illustrated her family, but there were blunders. Each child is granted one sheet of paper, the teacher had warned. So the girl, knowing true artists require enough paper to make mistakes and move on, mixed all the colors together for black and smudged out the weeping willow, the pool, the poodle. But what she didn't know then was how much she already knew. Today, her entire world, a faulty canvas she needs to correct. The misspelling on the menu, the crooked map, a fallen collar. She's trying to fix all the slips because blackening them out, she learned, isn't right. Bless that girl, so fed up with herself and the show that she uses black and then sets her work next to a rainbow, a boy and his horse, the Pacific. Now I look at my mother and wonder, what's under that forbidden color? Could I be the one to erase black, to uncover the pastel plain on which her heart beats like a spring garden?
Oh, wow. I don't get to enjoy poetry very often. So thank you for that. That was beautiful and also deeply sad. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it literally happened. She got one sheet of paper. She's like, I don't know why I painted it black. So I was imagining that maybe she had made an error, and she couldn't make an error.
Right.
And so she was like, yeah, I liked black, but it was, then it became a big issue. And because of the scrutiny on this young artist choice, she lived the rest of her life really, I think, walking on eggshells. So yes, my mother did end up pursuing her love of painting. She got an associate's degree in, illustration or something. Still in my childhood home, if you'd visit there, you'd see all sorts of paintings on the wall. But here's the thing. She is very critical of herself, and she still to this day, does not want to put a brush stroke on a new canvas unless it's the perfect brush stroke.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but wonder if it wasn't that moment that said, hey, you can't, you have to get it right the first time. You can't make a mistake. And she says, I'm not an artist, I'm just an illustrator. So she can take a tiny picture and make a huge painting out of it. And I say, Mom, that is creative. Not everyone can do that. That's amazing. And so she can't even see herself through those mistakes that started being an issue, in quote, an issue back when she was 5 years old.
Yeah. And that's, like this is, this is exactly what I teach in my Unleash Your Art, because it's like, we identify where that pivotal moment happened. And then we identify, is it stopping us altogether or is it hindering us? So it sounds like it's hindering her, because that's what happened. That's what happened with me. There was a lot of different things, nothing quite as extreme as that, but it was, I can't copy art. And by copy, I don't mean photocopy. I mean, we are not photocopiers. We cannot copy other people's art exactly. We are going to make it our own no matter what. So I can't copy. And that one was a big one for me. So I would do things. I would look on the computer and look at a bunch of different pictures of whales, for example, and then I would paint my whale. But if I didn't look at the pictures of the whale and just went ahead and painted it, then I wouldn't be as happy with the result. And so I would give myself a lot of shame and guilt, and I'm not creative. I'm not a real artist, or whatever I was telling myself. Definitely the creative one, I was said a lot, because I was copying, and I don't, it's, where did that come from? Why is it there? Is it stopping me or is it hindering me? And so that was hindering me because I was shaming myself for using my creativity, right? So that's the same kind of thing. And then we kind of work through that and heal that. And now I realize, like, we switch that narrative. Where am I, when I go to copy, air quotes, copy things, I have to switch that narrative. I'm not copying, or I'm copying because I'm not creative. No, I'm copying because I'm learning about whales. If I know more about my subject, then I can make a better product that I will appreciate more, right? So I'm switching that narrative, and it takes time to heal that. Yeah.
You're using a visual reference.
Yeah.
And people in your life who are artists, understand the importance of using a visual reference.
Yeah.
Period. For if you're a writer, you're an architect, you're a visual art, it doesn't matter. You need visual references. So thank you for sharing that. It sounds like that helped to spur you into teaching in this particular mode. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And I think actually teaching, because I was teaching other people's classes first, and then I made my own classes. And that's kind of where I found out where my limitations were. And then when I brought it into my own classes, that's definitely a big influence of that healing process of, where encouraging others, if they have those, and identifying those where we can work through them. Yes, we're all artists. We just paint or we don't paint, or we, right? And illustration is art, and even knitting is art. It's just, and you're copying a pattern, but that's okay. You're still making it your own, right? There's so many limitations that we hold on to, unfortunately, that we just don't need. But Yeah, we kind of segued into the creative limitations here. I like it.
Well, you and I are very similar in that I mean, this is how I view the world. It sounds like you do too, and that is, I firmly believe any single person can be creative.
Mhm.
So when I meet that person who says, "Oh, I can't, I'm not creative, I'm not imaginative," I say, challenge on.
Yeah.
And it also sounds like another way in which we're similar. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels as though you want to be that teacher that, or that adult that you didn't have. Like, you are teaching the classrooms of young Rebecca's. Is that
I would say so. I did have very creative parents, but you know, I would say they have their own limitations. And my mom listens to this podcast, so hi, mom. But but um, uh, it's maybe that's something that they need to work on. But I think it came from, various places. It wasn't just because, yes, my parents are very creative. My dad's a computer animator. That's literally his income. And then my mom uh, didn't, pursue it as a career or anything, but she definitely would whip out her paints every once in a while and create this beautiful art piece. And but she would never say that she's an artist. Her art for a long time was photography. So and now writing, actually. She writes a lot as well. So it's not like I was in a lacking of a creative space, but I kind of made up those own things on my own. Like a big one was uh, I was sitting in my class in grade 7, and beside a boy who would always draw very intricate, realistic pencil drawings. And those I find pencil realistic and pencil drawings are held very high on our creative like society's creative uh hierarchy, right? We associate, if you can draw realistically, you're an artist, right?
That's right.
So I was sitting beside him, and the teacher came over and complimented his art. This wasn't even art class, I don't think, but she complimented his art. I don't even know if I had art in front of me, let's to be perfectly honest, but I took her compliment to him, and knowing that I can't do what he does,
Got it.
as well, I'm not good enough. I
Got
can't
it.
do that like him. So it was not, it was just, it can be very subtle like that, where it's not even
Sure.
happening to you, right?
Sure.
It can be an outside view of what's happening to other people, and we hear other people's limitations passed down. Maybe my mom had a limitation on, because she talked about drawing too realistically. If we draw too realistic, then it looks like a photograph, and then it's almost discarded because everybody assumes it's a photograph and not actual art. So there was a limitation there, and I held on to that. And then so I can't think of any more right now, but that's kind of right there. You're gonna subconsciously, if you haven't done that work, you're gonna pass on your own creative limitations to others without even realizing, like that teacher or the person with the 2-year-old in your example.
Well, it's interesting. I'm having all sorts of revelations during this chat. I'm so happy. But it reminds me of how, again, in terms of accessibility, like how important it is for us, as youngsters and as adults, to hear about other people's experiences, because then we can celebrate in those experiences. So for example, if you had overheard someone's abstract art being complimented, then that would have done something else to you,
Right.
Coupled with hearing a compliment about the realism art, and so when we hear that other people succeed in a way that we wonder if we can succeed in, then hopefully that's inspirational to us. right? The importance of sharing our stories and sharing our journeys and sharing our struggles and our failures. I think all of that is really important in terms of, accessibility and seeing, okay, this person took this path, and do I want to take that path? Oh, they found success, so maybe I can find success.
Hmm. Yeah, and on the accessibility line, like when we have that creative freedom, when we aren't limiting ourselves in our creativity, wherever that creativity might show up, if we aren't limiting ourselves there, then we're able to be more adaptable, which
Mm-hmm.
equates to accessibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can, you know, you have this amazing thing. Your goal wasn't to be accessible. You just found this medium. If I'm maybe I'm wrong, is that right? Your goal wasn't to be accessible. It was to be to you found a beauty of writing about art and making it a literary experience. And now you've created something accessible for more people. You've made art accessible to the
Well,
visually impaired.
and the reason why I asked you if you were teaching to a bunch of little Rebeccas
Yeah,
is
yeah, oh
because
yeah.
that's exactly I'm teaching to a bunch of Janés who said, because I started out my career in the sciences,
Mhm.
and so I'm absolutely convinced, just of my own volition, like you have to choose a lane, and
Yeah.
so I chose at a very early age. I chose the sciences, and I went into a degree in pre-med, and I applied to medical school, and I did all of those things to create this life for myself as a physician, and I'm not a physician. I didn't get into medical school, and so I had to pivot, and so I had to find a way to access well, I didn't have to, but I was presented with a way of like, okay, do you want to pursue the sciences in another angle, not be a physician, maybe be a technologist in a laboratory, which I did for a while, in organ transplantation,
Oh,
or do you want to maybe try to be a creative writer? Well, how can you be creative? And once I realized that I could look at art
mhm.
as a way to give me some visual reference
Yeah.
to start describing on the page, then that was the start of me opening up my imagination.
Mm.
So yeah, so absolutely, I wrote the Ekphrastic Writer because I feel that engaging with the visual arts, here's my tagline, engaging with the visual arts can be a portal to your own creativity. And I believe that you can, as a teacher, you can teach any subject starting with the visual arts. You want to teach STEM? I can introduce to you the visual arts pieces that can be the starting point to talk about, technology, science, engineering, mathematics. So yeah.
Exactly. That's yes, that's 100%. And yes, I'll go quick back to I would now yes, I am teaching little Rebecca's. And I have older adults as well, so that's like the imaginative older Rebecca, where would I have gotten to if I didn't go this way. Um, so yes, I would agree. And then you can learn anything through art, and then I love the added literacy in there, but
Mhm.
that's just a
Yeah.
tool. That's just a tool for the art, because art is the most accessible thing, because there's like people like to put rules on art, but there are no rules on art. The best art has been made from breaking those rules in the first place, right? So um it's you can learn anything through art, and that's what I do. That's why I have my art literacy class, is to learn not just about literacy, not just about the connection between art and literacy, but also to learn something through art. Like they're learning about science, they're learning about dinosaurs and history and social emotional learning, and then I can also we have a mental health class as well, and so we're connecting mental health tools and giving kids realistic tools they can use in their daily life through literacy, sometimes not always, and through art, because we're giving them a visual connection. Like for example, one of my classes we do a the circle of control, and this is actually a pretty common art project, but I've adapted it to be more specific. So what I do is generally the circle of control, you put the circle, and then inside the circle you write things that that are in your control. I can control my body. I can control my choices. I can't control the weather. I can't control what other people do. I can't control how other people react, right? So that's basic on what the circle of control is. So how I connected that to art was very what's the word I'm looking for?
Tactile?
Yes. So it's inside the circle. We use a fine pointed item. So it could be a Sharpie or a colored pencil or a pencil, something that you have lots of control over. And it's very detailed and fine. So then you can use it with words. You can incorporate words if you have that ability, because we have young children as well in this class, all the way up to high school in different groups. But so the young ones might not have the words yet, whereas the high schoolers would have the words. So they can incorporate words or just pictures. And then but that's inside, that's your control. And then on the outside, we use charcoal, or we use chalk pastels, or we use something messy. And yes, we have a little bit of control over it because, it's our art. So there is a little bit, but no, we don't have control over this. So it's very directly related to what we're doing. So we're learning not just about how an acorn can grow. We're not just learning about dinosaurs. We're learning beyond, our how to make these very real connections.
That's amazing. I love that. You're not just making art, but you're learning about art making, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Learning about the different tools and techniques. Beautiful.
Sorry, my cat just knocked a bunch of stuff off the table. I told you this will probably happen. Okay. Your cat hasn't made an appearance yet, though. Oh, they're coming. Awesome. Okay. So is there anything else that you wanted to kind of end off with?
Well, I just congratulate you on what you're accomplishing. I mean, it's really lovely. And I don't think that this would have been this. I mean, like, all of the things that you are able to incorporate in one classroom just feels very 21st century to me, where we're recognizing that it's about, taking multiple disciplines and teaching the interdisciplinary experience in one setting. We're recognizing that has become really important, as opposed to like, okay, pick a lane. You're a scientist, you're an artist, you're an outcast, you're the social butterfly. Pick a lane. And I just really applaud you for what you're doing. So,
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for joining me. I really love what you're doing and how you're incorporating literacy into art and making it a literary experience. It's very beautiful. I really appreciate that. I used to write poems all the time, but that's not something that I practice anymore. But I do love poetry, and so I appreciate that quite a bit. Okay, so and again, we will have all of your books in the show notes so people can find you online on Instagram and everything as well. So check out the show notes there. So yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. This is such a pleasure, such a joy.
All right, bye.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you loved this episode, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes. And be sure to follow me on Facebook and Instagram to stay up to date on everything at Rebecca Jane Art. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, happy creating.